there's a lot of research that shows that adult men, most of us, don't have a single friend they could turn to in a time of need. We are in a crisis of brotherhood. We don't have that, and that keeps us in suffering. That keeps us in a state that we don't want, and with no clear way out.
Yeah, and just speaking to the addiction type of community, right? Addiction feeds itself in isolation. We saw massive spikes in depression and suicide and drug addiction, alcohol addiction, pornography addiction, just in the last 2.5 years, with everybody being forced home, locked down, don't go outside, put a mask on, don't touch human beings. It's like we were forced to be isolated, and then we saw all these things rise. So just once again, just speaking directly to what you're talking about there, Dan. Larry, if you can maybe jump in here a little bit and kind of talk about, from your background, your understanding, your development, like why is it so crucial? Number one, to have community, have men, have brotherhood, but also not just we're hanging around like patting each other on the back. We're actually intentional about the growth, about the study, about the development work that we're doing in ourselves.
I think one of the important segues to this is if you look at alcohol, porn, drugs, any of those vices or those addictions, they're always an escape, correct? Right? Every single time, it's an escape. It's an escape from your current situation, the present moment that we're in. And if we look at our happiest times, right, the times where we are the most present, the most we would never want to leave, right, the opposite of these environments where we want to escape. I guarantee everyone, if you sit there and really think about when was the last time that I wish that moment would continue for hours, weeks, years, that's always where you're in tight community connection and love with someone, right? I guarantee that none of you can come up with that point where that moment that you want to last forever is where you're alone, right? At the closest I can come to is like, a beautiful powder run where I'm just screaming out. But to me, that's where I'm in ultimate connection to God, right? So even in that moment where I am in nature by myself, I feel the most connected to the things that are greater than me. So those vices that we're looking at are always an escape, and they always produce isolation, right? Any one of those habits is isolation, right? That creates distance between us and those around us and ourselves, and I would argue us and God as well, right? So all of those escapes produce suffering. Every time that we're in deep connection and love, we're in community. And so to me, the reason you saw those drop offs, right? This is what we talked about as soon as we started talking about is they have these men didn't have community, right? They didn't have support. You give them knowledge and information, which is kind of the start of it, but it's the support that they have within that 4 month process that actually gets them free, right? Because now they're present, they're in community. At the end of that, as soon as that community goes away, the knowledge is not sufficient in and of itself to continue on to have success. And so the only solution to that is community, right? And there's all different levels of community when it comes to effectiveness, right? We have real loose community where there's like right now there's someone walking by the house outside, like they're my neighbor, but that's a very weak community that doesn't produce a lot of result. I believe that for men, the strongest community, and when I mean strongest, the biggest impact on your life, right? The biggest impact on your life and community is when you have a commonly held purpose that is internally derived, that requires tight coordination of action to get there, right? This brings up this, I call it this paradox of experience. In the SEALs, I lived in an environment where my competition tried to kill me. They only sent me to the world's worst places, and I only got missions that everyone else said was impossible. If I made a mistake or anyone on my team made a mistake, my life was at risk, and the lives of those I cared about were at risk. Can you think of a worse environment to be in? Right? That's about as bad as it gets. In that environment, I felt the most successful. That doesn't make sense, right? Worst environment, most success. Fast forward 2 years, my first company. We're making millions of dollars. I have a Porsche, a house, I have a boat, cars. I got to sleep. No one tried to kill me, right? Like it was, anyone would look at my life and say, that is an amazing life I would love to have. And yet I was miserable. How could that be, right? How could I be in the world's worst environments and feel successful, be in an environment that anyone would say is amazing and feel miserable? And the sole thing that enabled those two experiences was the three things I just said. When I was in my first company, I took for granted that everyone operated like SEALs because that's all I'd ever worked in. And so I had a horribly dysfunctional team, right? We didn't have a commonly held purpose. It wasn't internally derived, and we were in discord, not tightly coordinated action. So, regardless of the objective success I was producing, my experience sucked. As a SEAL, horrible experience, but we had a clearly defined mission, objective. They were internally derived, meaning we all bought into it internally, and we had to be in tightly coordinated action. And so this group gives us the ability to offer to the men out there the ability to have a commonly held purpose, becoming superhuman, becoming the best version of yourselves, have it be internally derived in that you're doing it for you and for those around you, and to have to be in tightly coordinated action with other men to get it. You add those three things, it doesn't matter what environment you're in, you're going to experience success. And I think that's the gift that we're offering these men out there.